Okay, so we're about a minute after 12, so I think we'll go ahead and get started so that Perla has plenty of time to get through her talk and we can have a nice Q&A at the end. So thank you so much for coming to today's Carla presentation. My name is Kate Paisani and I work at Carla. Before I introduce our speaker today, I just want to let you all know that we have one more talk this semester. It's on Tuesday, April 1st. Is that next week or the week after? I can't keep track of the dates right now, so I think it's in a couple of weeks. If you would like to attend, please use the link on the slide, and Karen has just put a copy of that link in the chat. We do require that people register for each talk separately. We have separate URLs or separate Zoom links for each talk. So we are really happy today to welcome Perla Escobar-Faerber, who is a PhD student in Hispanic Linguistics here at the University of Minnesota. Perla is one of the CARLA Fellows this year, so she has received support for her research to be able to travel to a conference and share what she's working on. But today she's going to be talking to this group, and the title of her talk is The Influence of Program Design on Heritage Speakers' Study Abroad Experiences. We will leave the chat open. Please use that to back channel, but also to enter your questions for the Q&A, and I will ask Perla any questions that you have when she's done with her talk. Perla, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today. And I would also like to thank Carla for the support that they have given me with this research. I expanded this project back in summer of 2023 when I started working with Professor Mandy Menke as a graduate research assistant. And now this project has developed into what I'm now going to present. And so just to get started here, so we know that the Hispanic population rate continues to increase here in the US. And as there has been an increase in this also in higher education, the Hispanic student enrollment has also gone up, and especially in study abroad settings. We know that currently almost 11% of students going in study abroad programs are Hispanic. And the previous research has shown that regarding heritage speakers, they have focused on researching the language development of heritage speakers, as well as their identity and the personal experiences. And there is a range of both positive and negative outcomes. And more particularly, it's important to understand their experiences abroad as we try to understand, right, how their language use and interactions develop, right, in this additional domain. Now, we know that interaction plays a central role in language development. Various linguistic theories have emphasized that interaction is very fundamental to this. And study abroad is an ideal context for language acquisition, as students, right, have the opportunity to be immersed in more environments where they can use the language daily. Also, the exposure to the target language that students are learning can be an advantage to their language gains. But there are also inconsistent findings with this, depending, right, on how much students can engage abroad. So for that reason, it's important to consider social networks as a tool that can help us to understand how language learning can occur abroad. In this particular case, social networks can help us to know who students interact with, and also determine how often they do so and in what context. And more particularly, we know that back in 1980, Milroy is, I would say, the main work that established this great tool, the use of social networks to teach us that dense interconnected networks can reinforce linguistic norms. And when it comes down to study abroad context, the greater integration that students can have into the host communities can also lead to higher language use. But we also know, based on research, that uh, it is very common to find networks with just English dominant peers. So this would be, right, the colleagues or classmates that students have when they participate abroad. And these kind of networks can limit the target language gains that they can have. Um, Also, the study abroad program structures can influence their social networks. So, for example, having a structured program activities such as maybe participating in sports or also in community service, this can increase that engagement that study abroad students can have with native speakers. And in regards to heritage speakers and study abroad, there is very little research when it comes down to their social networks and language use. Um, what we know so far, based on the research that has been done, is that heritage language learners approach study abroad a little different than L2 learners because they often seek to reconnect with their culture um, and not just focus, right, on the, I guess, language learning component. Also, their social network formation can be shaped by their identity and linguistic confidence. And also, it's really important to take into consideration how the language related insecurity can impact their integration abroad, um, as this can limit, right, their engagement with locals depending on how they see themselves and how they feel, right, in the local community. As I mentioned, right, regarding L2 learners, we also know that for heritage speakers, the structured engagement can enhance their heritage language use. And also, just building up on these insights, right, that I've gone over, um, it's important to consider how heritage language learners balance not just the contacts that they are able or friendships that they're able to build abroad, but also the transnational ties that they have back home and how taking into consideration all these different domains can help us to understand their bilingual practices and social engagement in a different place. So this study builds on all these insights to explore how the study abroad program structure can shape heritage language learners' social networks and language use. So in this presentation, I will focus on the following research questions. How do heritage language learners in different study abroad contexts describe their social networks and their language practices? Also, what factors facilitate or hinder heritage language learners' engagement with locals and language practices in different study abroad programs? And how does study abroad program structure influence heritage language learners' integration into the local community and their language practices? So in this study, I collected data from several participants, but just for this presentation, I will be focusing on two case studies. So it is based on two female Spanish heritage language learners that back at the time of data collection were 23 and 24. And I'm using the following definition for heritage language learner. So this refers to an individual with a personal connection to the language through their family or community, regardless of language proficiency. So Elena was one of the participants and she studied in Merida, Mexico, and Lily participated in Alcalá de Henares, Spain. They were both juniors studying language and education in a private university in the Western US. And they were both raised bilingual with limited Spanish spoken at home. Both of the participants expressed feeling much more fluent in English than in Spanish. And to get into more details about each participant, Elena was born and raised in Idaho and later moved to Missouri. And she was majoring in Spanish teaching with a minor in dual language immersion. She was raised bilingual from birth by a Venezuelan mother and an American father. And she mentioned that as she grew older, her parents spoke Spanish occasionally because her mom wanted her children, well, her and her siblings, to focus more on learning English at home. And so she mostly heard Spanish with her extended family when they gathered during the week and, well, weekends. And she studied Spanish in an elementary immersion program and also in middle school and high school. And before going abroad, she had visited Venezuela for a whole month with her family. And she also served a Spanish-speaking religious mission for 18 months in Southern California, where she interacted right with many people from Latin America on a daily basis in Spanish. Then Lily, who studied in Spain, she's from California and she majored in elementary education and minored in Spanish. And she was raised bilingual from birth by a Mexican American mother and a Mexican father. And she grew up hearing Spanish mostly in her community, at church, and she also had a Mexican nanny. During the interview, she mentioned that well, her nanny would try to teach her and her siblings Spanish through TV, music, books, but she felt that she wasn't that successful because at least they didn't speak as much Spanish as maybe the nanny expected. She took Spanish in high school, and like I mentioned, I was now studying it in college. And before her sojourn, she had experience living in different Spanish-speaking communities. So she also served a religious mission like Elena, but she was able to live 4 months in Hidalgo, Mexico. But due to the pandemic, she had to come back to the US, where she finished the rest of her mission, serving 14 months in El Paso, Texas, and Albuquerque, New Mexico. So the study abroad programs where the participants participated are the following. So both of these programs, what they had in common that they were about the same size, 22 to 25 students. Both of these programs required the students to complete a pre-departure orientation for the entire semester before going abroad. And once they were at the study site, they completed courses at the local university that were taught by native professors. And all of the classmates were study abroad peers. They also participated in Sunday services at the local congregation that lasted about 2 hours weekly. And Elena studied in a 7-week summer program where she was part of a group of 5 heritage language learners. And all of them lived with host families and also had the opportunity to participate in a 2-hour weekly community service. Then Lily participated in a 14-week fall program, and she lived in student dormitories in Alcalá de Henares. She mentioned that in these dormitories, they had, well, not just the study abroad peers, but they also were able to socialize with Spaniards and also people from Latin America that were studying in this city. And they also housed students from the UK that were also studying Spanish, like the study abroad students. And Lily was the only heritage speaker in this program. So we see again, right, some of the similarities and big differences between these two programs. So moving on to how I collected the data. So I conducted semi-structured interviews that lasted about 30 minutes via Zoom. And a lot of these questions came from a study by Dewey and his colleagues in 2013, where they also had a similar study, but with L2 learners. And some of the sample questions that I asked in the interviews were the following. How would you describe your current experience abroad? Please share why you think you have been able to develop good friendships with local people, and as well as share why they were not able to do so. And then the participants also completed a language use and social networks abroad questionnaire. This questionnaire was developed specifically for this study. So at that time when I designed the study back in fall of 2022, there were no existing questionnaires that fully captured all of the points that I wanted to research for this project, particularly with heritage speakers. So what I did was adapt a lot of the instruments by these authors that I have highlighted here, right? Because they had already researched these topics, but only on L2 learners. So I took into consideration all these instruments and combined them, right, to create one single questionnaire on Qualtrics. And this was tailored to account for the unique linguistic backgrounds of the heritage speakers and also ensure, right, that I could collect data from their bilingual socialization and language practices. So overall, the questionnaire had 3 sections. First, the participants gave their background information, such as previous experience with Spanish, as well as the study abroad program details. And then they completed questions under use of English and Spanish in 27 different domains. And they answer based on a 5-point Likert scale, whether they use the language on an everyday or if they never used it. It also included open-ended questions where students could respond to the factors that influence their use of Spanish, as well as the engagement that they had with locals abroad. And the final section, section 3, asked for participants to list the 20 most regular contacts. So this could include, right, their study abroad peers, locals, and transnational ties. And here, what I mean, right, by transnational ties is those friendships or relationships that they had with individuals back home, such as friends or family. And I decided to include transnational contacts for 2 reasons. First, some previous studies, such as Mitchell in 2017, included for L2 learners this additional transnational domain to see how contact with home communities can determine, right, how much the students interact, right, with people abroad. And then also a study by Velasquez in 2013 that focused on bilingual speakers here in the US, also examined, right, how transnational network ties can influence, right, not just the language use, but also get a fuller picture of how the heritage language can be used in different domains. So I collected the data during the last week of the study abroad program or shortly after, depending on the participant availability. And they completed the questionnaire first, followed by the interviews. Then I analyzed the data using thematic analysis, as this provides a flexible and also systematic approach for identifying patterns in qualitative data sets. And this method also allowed me to organize and interpret the key themes that participants share with me through both the questionnaire as well as the interview. And I also focus on the themes that emerge in relation, right, to the research questions, such as their use of Spanish, their social networks, and also, right, the factors that influence both of these. And regarding the social network analysis, I took a descriptive approach. So maybe some of you are familiarized with social network analysis. When you have larger data sets with more participants, you can conduct an actual statistical analysis to see how different variables, right, can influence certain behavior. But in this case, because we only have 2 participants, it's just a descriptive approach that focuses on the network size, the composition, so meaning trying to explain who these contacts are, also the intensity, so how close or not close the participants are to the contacts that they described in the questionnaire, and also the primary languages of interaction with these individuals. And by combining the descriptive analysis of the social networks as well as the qualitative data, right, from the questionnaires and the interviews. My goal was to provide, right, a more comprehensive understanding of both the individual experiences, but also look for those broad social patterns. So now moving on to the results, the first research question that focused right on trying to see how the participants described their social networks. Lily in Spain reported a network of 10 contacts. So she mentioned that she interacted daily with her classmates, with whom she had a close relationship. And she also mentioned interacting several times a week with her mom, with whom she had a very close relationship, and also interacted with her professor several times a week, and she had a close relationship with her. And in the following figure, we can see Lily's social network, right? Like I mentioned, so she reported 10 contacts, 7 of whom were her classmates, family back home, and the professor. Now, for Elena, she reported 13 contacts, and 2 of those were her classmates, 5 were the host family members, and then 4 members from her own family back home, and 2 of her professors. And she described her relationships mostly as either close or very close, except for her professors with whom she had a not at all close relationship. She also mentioned, right, that she interacted daily with her family back home and her study abroad roommates, and that she engaged with her host family members and professors several times a week. Also, during the interview, she mentioned very specifically that she was also able to interact with other locals, although she did not list them as contacts. In the questionnaire, she mentioned that she came across people that she talked with on a daily basis at the university, also with Uber drivers that would take them to places that they wanted to visit, and also talk to locals at church and at the community service facility. And now the second part of the first research question on how the participants described their language practices. We see, right, some similar as well as different patterns between both of the participants. So just to explain here really quickly, so the red refers to Elena that studied in Mexico, and then what you see in blue is Lily in Spain. And we go from right 1, which is only using the language a few times per month, to once a week, a couple times per week, several times a week, or 5 using it every day. So Elena mentioned using Spanish a couple times a week, like we see, right, for thinking, for personal tasks, entertainment such as social media, TV, and also mentioned that only once a week she used Spanish with locals in Sunday services and in community service. And her higher use of Spanish was daily, right, with her host family, when she conversed with study abroad peers, and also with locals. She also used Spanish on a daily basis for music, listening to music, homework tasks, organized activities, and in the classroom. And on the other hand, we see, right, that Lily has again some of those similarities, but also big differences, particularly when we see that Elena, in her study abroad program, she had access, right, to doing community service. She lived with a host family that gave her these 2 additional domains to use Spanish. And like I mentioned at the beginning, Lily was the only heritage speaker in her study abroad program, which could have impacted, right, how much Spanish she was able to use with her L2 peers. And on the other hand, because Elena had other heritage speakers in the program, they were able to speak not just Spanish with each other, but also in the majority of cases, they reported well, Elena and her friends, right, in Mexico, they reported using Spanish overall, right, with all of her study abroad peers. Now, regarding the use of English by both participants, we see that for more personal interest, they use it more, right, for thinking on a daily basis, as well as for personal tasks such as email, social media, and entertainment. It just kind of varied on how much both of them decided, right, to consume, TV or movies during their time abroad. We also see that both of them use English on a daily basis to communicate with family back home. And like I just mentioned when we were talking about, right, their use of Spanish with their study abroad group, Lily reported using English on a daily basis. And when I asked her as a follow-up question during an interview regarding this, she mentioned that she used English for both for short and long conversation that she had with them, especially when engaging with longer conversations where they would talk about personal things. They would use it in the short conversations that were regarding topics such as things that they had to do, homework, anything basically related to the study abroad program. They mostly communicated in Spanish because they knew that they needed to practice. But yes, and then for Elena, just to clarify here regarding her use of English with her study abroad peers. So on the questionnaire, she reported using Spanish all the time with her, both the L2 learners and the heritage speakers, but she did mention using some English at times with her L2 learners, especially at the beginning of the program. Once things got a little bit better, then they mostly spoke in Spanish. And now moving on to the second research question regarding the results on the influencing factors, both on the language practices as well as on the engagement with locals. Lily reported that she felt that she had a good Spanish proficiency, which allowed her to speak the language. She also felt that she was able to strengthen her identity as a Spanish speaker. And she also had pride in her heritage, which helped with that. And she also had opportunities to interact with locals, especially in where she lived. And I'll go more into details about that in a moment. Just going back here to the inhibiting factor. So I forgot to mention one thing. So I put an asterisk regarding the self-perceived good Spanish proficiency, and then the self-perceived low Spanish proficiency, because she selected both factors. And so when I asked her about this in the interview, she mentioned that although she felt that she had a good proficiency abroad, especially when comparing herself with like her L2 learners, or even thinking about her Spanish when she would speak it back here in the US, she felt that she had a really good Spanish. But then being in Spain and seeing how native speakers communicated also made her feel that her Spanish was not right at the same level as native speakers in Spain. So for that reason, right, she reported both of these. She also mentioned, right, that she had been told that by native speakers that her Spanish was not good enough, which also inhibited her use of Spanish, and that overall she felt more confident in English. Also, she identified, even though she identified as Hispanic, she did mention that she also felt very white inside, and her introverted personality interfere with her use of Spanish and engagement with locals. And we see this in the following excerpt where she said, I am pretty shy, so I mostly interact with my study abroad group. And because I grew up in the States, I feel very white inside. I feel more comfortable having deep friendships with my study abroad group than with natives or locals. But it is fun to see how when we travel to different cities or even in El Comedor, because of the way I look, people are like, you're Latina, you totally understand. It's kind of cool to have that initial connection of she understands. Their conversations are very different when they talk to the white students. So just to provide a little bit more feedback, explanation here on what she shared. So even though she felt like she looked, brown outside, she felt white inside because of the way she grew up here in the States. Nevertheless, because of her bilingual background, she also felt that it was easier for her to build that initial connection with the Spaniards and Latin American students in El Comedor, where she lived. So usually it was easier for them to talk to her because of that. And they would usually think like, oh, she's like on our side, like she understands our experiences. While on the other hand, they had to explain to the other students, that L2 learners, right, how things were in Spain, school, things like that. Um, and then regarding the other factor that she mentioned, right, she also felt that she predominantly interacted with her study abroad peer group. And although she does mention, right, that she feels more comfortable being with them, she also explains, right, that not just being with them all the time, but she would have liked, right, to have more interactions with Spanish speakers, and maybe that would have helped her to feel more comfortable, right, reaching out to talk to them. And then Elena reported also some similar factors. So she mentioned that opportunities to interact with locals was her encouraging factor to use Spanish and also to engage with locals. Um, but this was also seen as limited, and I'll explain that in a little bit. She also mentioned that for her inhibiting factors, she felt kind of similar to Lily, that she perceived herself as having a low Spanish proficiency, and also receiving corrections from native speakers influence on the way that she felt abroad, and overall also felt more confident in English. Now here regarding the limited opportunities with locals, although we did see, right, in the previous figures that I shared, that she was able to use Spanish and engage with locals more through the opportunity to um, participate in community service, as well as live with the host family, provided, right, those two additional domains. But she also felt that she was limited in the sense that she was not like 100% immersed as she wanted, because of the structure of her study abroad group. And this is what she shared. So I've been studying Spanish my whole life, trying to improve and get better. And that was the main reason I came and spoke Spanish. I wanted to have an immersion experience, and I felt like this was the best one because I get to live with a family. And I really think that's been my favorite thing. It's been kind of hard though, because I'm with other students a lot of the time. Um, and then just one final thing here to mention, right? We see that she does say that they interact, well, she interacted, right, a lot of the time with her study abroad group, compared to Lily, right, that she mentions that she's with them, like basically, right, the whole time. Um, and then moving on to the last question on the influence of the program structure on the community, local community integration and language use. Um, so just based on the data that I collected to answer research questions 1 and 2, and interpreting those findings, they suggest that the study abroad program structure can play a significant role in shaping heritage speakers integration and language use. And we see first this on the differences, right, in housing arrangements, where Elena was able to stay right with the host family, which facilitated that integration of learning more about the culture and using the language. And on the other hand, Lily kind of had that right setup to also interact with locals in the student dormitory, but she didn't take full opportunity of this. Then the second way, right, where we can see this difference is in the community engagement opportunities. Elena had this weekly service project that expanded her contact with locals, while Lily mentioned only right church being the additional domain. And Elena also, just to briefly reiterate, right, she also had this domain of attending church in Spanish. Also, just the social circles that both of these participants had while they studied abroad, right? This is not something that they directly could change. And I mean, neither the program, right, could change this. It just kind of depends on the enrollment that each study abroad program receives each year. But Elena was able to talk, right, to more heritage speakers when she participated, and Lily was the only one in her program. And then also, right, just the other structured activities that the program provided for Elena, such as going on cultural events that she got invited to by her professors and also by her host family. That played a key role, right, in that. And we also see that overall, right, the individual factors such as self-perception, shyness, language insecurity can also play a big role in how students are able to integrate abroad and also use the heritage language. And also, just to wrap up with this final question, both of the participants suggested that they would have liked to spend less time with their study abroad peers. Because that would have maybe also helped them to take advantage of the opportunities that they did have to talk with locals, and also just having the program provide those structure opportunities would support them in this learning goal. And so now moving on to the discussion. So we see that a key theme, right, that emerged in the studies, the role, right, of social networks in shaping the language use abroad. And consistent with previous research, the interactions with locals outside homestays were limited. We also see that it's very common to socialize with non-native peers, as it has been found, right, with L2 learners abroad. Particularly, right, we know that Lily used English with her peers, and Spanish was just limited to those academic contexts a few times a week. And Elena was able to use Spanish, right, on a daily basis with her peers and locals. Some of the facilitating factors that we see here are the structure activities that have also been mentioned by previous studies. And for inhibiting factors, the low self-perceived Spanish proficiency can affect local engagement, particularly personal identity and motivation play a role on language learning experiences for heritage speakers. And we see this, right, in the example that I mentioned of Lily, that she, even though she looked brown outside, she felt white inside because of the way that she grew up, and also her shyness interfere, right, with how much she was able to engage in the local community. So to conclude, the study contributes to the expanding body of research on heritage language learners in study abroad contexts by exploring how their social networks and language use interact to shape their experiences. And it does confirm, right, that there are integration challenges, and also there are challenges, right, for their use of Spanish, just like it happens with L2 learners. It also shows that heritage language learners negotiate linguistic identity, and they have to, right, take this into consideration as they try to participate abroad. And lastly, we see that both individual participant as well as study abroad program factors can influence their language use and their networks abroad. And just some final thoughts on this. I know that the project only focused, right, on 2 participants and 2 study abroad settings. So some suggestions for future research would be to compare, right, more programs, and also get more participants in the study, and trying to focus more specifically on other key factors like the ones mentioned here, such as self-confidence, how much they've been previously exposed to Spanish, and their willingness to engage can help us understand their experiences more. And some practical recommendations would be to see, right, how trying to see the structured socializations with locals, how this can help them with their language learning, and also trying to incorporate some self-reflection, as that's one of the tools that I did not use for this study. And I think that overall making these tweaks can help assess not just the programs that we have now, but also help us to provide better programs that can support the goals of heritage language learners. And that's all for today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Perla. I find this research so fascinating. I remember when one of our former students, Trip Strawbridge, did a study on social networks and study abroad, and it was just so interesting, and it makes so many questions come to mind for me. And I do have questions, but I want to ask a question that came up in the chat because it's related to one of the future research ideas that you talked about, and that's about students' reported language use practices. So Mandy asks, what are your thoughts on the usefulness of the reported language use practices? How often they use English or Spanish according to interlocutor and activity? Does this give you useful and reliable data? If not, how might you rethink gathering this kind of data?
Yeah, so that is one, I would say, advantage of having the self-reports, that it can be in a way easier to gather that data, but at the same time, it is a limitation because we don't really know completely if what the reporting is, right, reliable. Because one thing is, right, what it is, and then what we perceive on that. So one of the things that I have considered, or that others can consider, right, if they would like to research more this topic, would be to also collect it would what is it, language diaries, or also, if possible, that the researcher can observe the participants. But that would limit, right, that you can probably only work maybe on like one program or two at a time to be able to observe those practices throughout the study abroad length.
Yeah, Mandy. So Mandy has another question about structured socialization, and sort of what that might look like. Have you seen that with native speakers in the research?
Can you repeat the final?
Yeah, so here's the
question,
question.
please?
Are there examples of structured socialization with native speakers in the literature? What might that look like?
Oh, I see. I think there have been some studies that have mentioned, for example, in this case, I think it was Sabisky's or Compiègne study that did see, for example, the structural activities would be like sports. So they've seen how participating in sports, or like tango classes, because one of the studies was done in Argentina, and so like receiving classes, right, or guidance on playing a sport, or dancing, helped with not just the being able to build more connections with people abroad, but also using the language. So that, I mean, that is one of the ideas that I kind of have, where maybe intervening more directly on the type of structures that are provided could help. It could help us to see if having those structured activities can help us to see if participants actually, right, engage more with locals.
Or like if they're in programs that have like a Spanish only like contract that they have to sign, right? Like sometimes that can help increase that kind of thing. It's not structured socialization, but it's a contextual factor that could potentially influence where they're using Spanish and with whom. So I have a question about
Yes.
the size of the social networks. So I was kind of struck, I thought that those social networks seemed kind of small, that
Mm-hmm.
had only 10 and 13. And so I wondered if, I have a bunch of questions about that. So my first question is that if how this compares to other studies that look at social networks, is it a similar size? But I'm also wondering about whether or not those students, and you probably can't answer this, have similarly sized social networks at home. Because it seems to me that in the post-COVID era, young people have a harder time creating social networks. I mean, this is just, I'm saying this anecdotally, not as somebody who has any evidence to provide. And I wonder if that's also a factor, and if looking at social networks at home in addition to social networks abroad would give any insights into this.
No, yes, I think those are all really good questions, and I think I can answer several of the things that you mentioned. So, first, yeah, so the patterns that these individuals reflect are similar to what we see in the literature for L2 learners. I know in the studies that Dewey and colleagues have that they have done, right? They have reported like a range of about like 10 people to up to 40 people. I mean, 40, right? It's a lot. Um, but I think one of the factors that played a role in the amount of contacts that the participants in my study reported is that most of the contacts were, they had a either close or very close relationship with them. So my assumption is that they only wanted to probably focus on the people that they either had a very close relationship with or that they really interacted with, right, on a either daily basis or like several times a week. Also, this was the last part of the questionnaire, and so that is one of the things that I know at what, like you were mentioning, Tripp's study. He does mention that sometimes students can become fatigued, right, of reporting all this data. And so the questionnaire itself, depending on how many social networks they report, it can take at least 30 minutes up to maybe 50 or 60 minutes just on, right, because we collect all this information of like how close they are to the individual, what languages they speak for each person that they report. And so even though, I mean, they didn't tell me, it could have been that they just kind of got lazy of like trying to report the rest of the context. So that, yeah, that is one thing to take into account. And I had not considered what you mentioned about the, pre and post pandemic. But yes, these individuals were, I mean, yeah, they definitely lived, right, the pandemic. And so maybe, right, because of that, they already have smaller, right, smaller social networks compared to maybe individuals in other generations. But that would be something interesting to look at to see also how their networks might be different at home and abroad.
Yeah, related to that, I was also wondering about the influence of their daily contact with their families and friends at home. Like that's something that's relatively new in the 21st century, to be able to be in touch on a daily basis like that with people at home. And so, what is the impact of that on creating social networks when you have such a strong reliance on your social networks at home while you're studying abroad?
Yes, I did not consider that factor for this particular presentation. Um, but in the manuscript that I was working on, it did come out to be important or relevant because two of the participants had, I mean, all four of them had daily contact with their families, but two of them had, some situations going on that they did not engage with their study abroad peers nor with the local community as much as they would have liked. And so that came out to be important, right, in how much they were able to socialize. And some previous studies have also found that what you mentioned, right, having that connection now with people back home can interfere with, yeah, with their socialization abroad.
Yeah, and potentially with their use of the target language too, right?
Yes.
Especially if they're using English with their networks at home. Yeah. So I know that maybe you can't answer this question, but we were chatting before we started the presentation, Perla, and you said you're still trying to think about what you might focus on for your dissertation research. Do you have some ideas about how you might expand what you've done related to social networking research and study abroad?
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm considering is thinking more about the direct impact that the program structure can have on the heritage language learners' language use and also social integration. So I'm trying to, yes, really think about the factors that I would like to consider and see what kind of intervention could be done to assess that.
Mhm. Well, we don't have any additional questions in the chat, so I want to thank Perla for this really clear and interesting presentation. And I want to thank all of you for coming today and participating in Carla's presentation series. As I mentioned, we have one more talk this semester. We hope to see you there. And thank you again and have a great day.